Sitting comfortably? Great. My name is Ben Putley. I am the CEO and co-founder of Alkimi. Now, Alkimi is an ad exchange. We've built it on chain. We use a very exciting piece of technology, the entire Sui stack, and we have Rebecca, who's the managing executive of Walrus, and then we have George, who's one of the co-founders of Mysten Labs, who are the architects of such a brilliant platform. And then we're joined by Laura as well from Conquista PR. Today, I think it would be great, and Rebecca, I'm going to come to you first, to talk about data, but I think more importantly, the integrity of data. What does that mean to you? Why is it important? Yeah, love to hear your take.
Great. So I am Rebecca. I am the managing executive of Walrus Foundation, and Walrus is a data platform that allows people to build applications on top of it to store, serve, and monetize their data. Data integrity is really everything. You know, we now talk about the AI and data economy, ensuring that that data is what you think it is, it came from where you thought it came from, and it hasn't been changed, is actually the key to the future of this AI era being successful.
Yeah, I would agree. It's, I think data on chain has been a tough nut to crack, and in my opinion, Walrus has done an amazing job of that. And George, as one of the people that came up with that, I'd love to kind of hear how you think. A, how did you solve the problem? B, like, why was it such an important problem to solve?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. So first of all, I'm George. I'm one of the co-founders. There are 5 of us of Mysten Labs. We built, we initiated Sui, and now we kind of like develop protocols around the kind of Sui stack to make it really a full stack that allows you to build decentralized applications. And of course, Sui is a ledger, but then Walrus is a storage system, and we continue building all sorts of components. And really, the realization came early that if we're serious about decentralization, what we need to build is not just ways to decentralize effectively account books, right? Because once you decentralize account books, then you start realizing that all other parts of your developer stack, namely where your data lives, how you check that it's correct, how do you check who's allowed to access it, all of that as well may be susceptible to the same kind of risks as your account books if it is centralized, if it is relying on single providers, etc., right? So it came quite naturally to us and to the commitment we have to build a full decentralized application stack that, of course, data is the second most important thing after accounts, right? And somehow it has to be benefiting from the benefit from being stored in exactly the same way as a blockchain, right? And also managed in terms of its economics and the affordances it gives, like a blockchain. And this really goes at the heart of your question. A lot of businesses in the 21st century really revolve around data, including Alkimi, of course, and therefore, treating that data in exactly the same way as, let's say, we treat the Bitcoin in the Bitcoin world, namely having a native representation on a ledger, or NFTs in other world, makes sense, right? And that's how the project started.
Yeah, I think when you look at the mainstream adoption to date has been like financialization, really, like an evolved version of the financialization that we've seen today, and a lot of the information associated to that transaction is quite discrete in the actual transaction itself. But if you look to expand that beyond kind of purely financial products into other sectors of businesses that operate in the world, I think associated data becomes much more important, and tying that to the benefits afforded by a blockchain like Sui really opens up the application to serve markets that exist outside of financial markets. And I think That's certainly something that we do at Alkimi. We help people buy ads and sell ads, and there's a lot of information that comes with that. It's not just the price you paid, it's which website did you buy, which ad format did you purchase, who was the person you targeted, are you allowed to target that person, what did they do after they saw that ad? Like, there's a lot that needs to come alongside that. And Laura, as a question for you, I wonder, like, how do you think the ability to store more information on change might impact the sector in which you work?
Hi, Ben. Thank you very much. So I'm Laura. I'm the CEO and founder of Conquista PIA. We do strategic communications and public relations for technical projects, so DeFi infrastructure, stablecoins, exchanges, and everything. And we're confronted with that problem really often, actually. So the first barrier to adoption that we see is the narrative itself. I think that most of the times we're talking about developers, we're talking about users on the retail side, for example, that want to approach different chains and they don't know what these stand for. And I think that the challenge of very technical founders is to be able to unravel what they really mean and how the user can benefit from that. So how I would go around a project that is highly technical is at first doing exploratory or discovery calls to try to understand what the tech stack is going to be behind that, and then try to put it in a very digestible way in the first place.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think the really finding a way to just, rather than talk about the underlying infrastructure, and I know we will do that today, but it's really like, what problems are you solving for people that have problems? How do you use a blockchain to do that? And then in turn, what kind of markets? Are there different ways in which you can monetize this new version of that infrastructure? And I think storage is an important part of that. So Rebecca, like, how do you think about now with Walrus bringing storage on chain, you've created this potential to monetize data in a way that wasn't feasible prior to that?
So I am going to answer that question in a bit, but I think Laura is right, and I think it's the stories are such an important part of our world, and for 10 years now, we have been talking about technology and not talking about the stories. And Alkimi is probably my favorite story on Walrus. Well, that's why I'm here. And actually, we were just having a chat, and I wonder if it's worth you telling the story in a human way here. So forgetting Walrus for a little bit, like, what are you guys actually doing? And why does anyone in this room care? And can they tell any of their friends? Because I could tell them what you do.
I think that probably everyone in this room has been pissed off by an ad online. They've probably seen one today.
A great way to start a story.
Yeah, you've seen one today, and I think often people don't think much past the fact that, no, I don't want to sign up to Monday.com. Please don't show me this ad for the 5th time today. But really, the role that advertising has had to play in the internet at large is that really it's the only way in which people that have created content have found a reliable way in which they can monetize it and then create revenue to expand their team, to have more editors, to develop their platform, whatever it may be. Fundamentally, if you're creating content online, ads are a brilliant way to make money from that. Now, what's happened as the internet has grown and the ads market has become very big business is that a lot of people have inserted themselves between the buyer and the seller of a particular ad, and they have done so while simultaneously charging very, very high fees. What that has meant is that you will see more annoying ads because people are having to spend more money to try and get the attention they think they deserve in front of the right person at the right time. And if you're selling ads, you're not getting as much money for them as you thought. So you're actually having to put more ads on your website, even though you know that it's going to piss more people off. So really what we've done at Alkimi for the last 4.5 years now is create a direct route from a buyer of an ad to a seller of an ad, collapse the fees that sit in the middle. So if you're buying ads, you get more of your audience for the money you're paying. And if you're selling ads, you get more dollars for the ads that you're selling on your website. We've only been able to achieve that because a blockchain allows us to distribute the costs and use the economic models created by validators and then socialize that amongst the people that use the platform. Provide transparency to the people that are buying and selling ads, so really understanding for the first time where fees are being taken, by whom, at which point, so they understand their supply chain and can optimize it as such, and really just like restore a lot of the value exchange that has been lost online as the ad market has got complicated and grown to be huge, really simplifying that and just allowing the pipes to trade rather than extract value from the trading that takes place. And digital advertising is really the last internet market where that exists and is as rife as it is at the rates and the fees at which people charge of any market that is kind of traded digitally.
So what I really love about that is when we look at the title of today's talk, Provable Truth and Web3 Infrastructure, this is actually what Alkimi have done, but nobody who uses Alkimi knows that they are using Web3 infrastructure at all. But my God, do they love the provable truth that they get with the return on investment. And we have talked about that again for so long, like how can we get this adoption from Web3 into the wider world? And I think this is such a brilliant case study to prove that you can do that. I love the fact that it's on Walrus because that's the foundation I run, so I get to talk about it a lot. But actually probably even more impressive than it being on Walrus, sadly, is probably being on the whole SWE stack. So Walrus is just one part of this, but you've used the whole stack, haven't you?
We have, yeah. We've used SWE, Seal, Nautilus, and Walrus, the full house.
Okay, what have they not used there that they could use, George? ZK login, maybe?
Yeah, so I mean, what I find really interesting about the Alkimi architecture from a technical and infrastructural point of view is that it's not just about data that is stored in a decentralized store, right? Yeah. It is about that data then flowing where it is allowed to be accessed. First of all, there is access control, and it is quite granular. That's very important, right? Because not all data should be read and changed by everybody. And then that data is processed also in a way that offers high integrity guarantees. And to me, as Rebecca said, Alkimi is a great example of a use of this kind of end-to-end architecture for having, high value, high integrity, data processing based economies, right? And I mean, my vision is, of course, that Alkimi is the first of many such examples. Yeah. And we discussed earlier on also about how, as we're moving towards an AI era, right, where more and more machines are going to be making decisions based on past data, based on current lookups for data, based on user activity, that kind of pattern where you store data in a way that you know where it came from, you know what it is, you can flexibly give access control to whoever is allowed or whatever model or whatever query engine is allowed. And then there is some processing that, again, can be certified as being correct, might actually become the foundation of how we trust, technology, broadly speaking, in that new era that we're moving into.
Yeah. I think it almost like removes trust from the equation. It's a bit of a cliche, but like you won't need to trust us, you can just verify it. And there are certificates the entire way that prove that nothing's changed, that what you're reading is accurate, and you can run the exact same sums that we did to encrypt it to show that nothing has changed, and that they don't even need to ask me about it. Just like, have a look.
Actually, I have a question for you, Ben.
Yeah.
So with the rise of AI and bots scraping different sites, how is the business model for you guys changing in terms of placing ads?
It's a good question. I I'll preface it by saying that people still buy print ads and people still buy outdoor ads. So that is technology that is hundreds of years old at this point. I think there's always some lag in how people's behaviors change. Like some of the brands that use the exchange, like, do you think we should do ads online? I'm like, yeah, I can think of some good reasons why you might want to do that. So people that buy ads are at various different points in how they adopt technology, and often that is the rate at which technology moves is the amount of attention that particular platform gets. And I think that you will certainly see, at least when like new signups to various LLMs soften, that they will look to alternative business models. And I think some of the biggest Web2 companies ever fundamentally are ad tech businesses, right? They've made money from monetizing attention. So I think it is a matter of time until that happens. The rate at which it happens, I think we could probably debate, but I think there'll always be a place for a brand to display a message, because we don't yet all live in AI. So there's times when you've pulled yourself out of ChatGPT and you've read your article on the Financial Times, or you've walked to go to dinner in Piccadilly Circus and you see the outdoor ads, or you sit and watch TV and you see one on TV. So a mix of channels will be good. I think it will be interesting to see how incentivizing an LLM based off of monetary value will warp the results it gives you for various queries, and that will be interesting to see how that plays out. I mean, it's not too dissimilar to the way that search works, so you could argue there is a playbook for that. But I mean, fundamentally, it could allow you to do hyper-targeted messaging. I think for e-commerce, it will be very powerful in driving like sales that can happen in the application itself. But still, I think a blockchain has an important role to play there, because at the moment, it's just data that's being sent, but a blockchain actually allows you to couple the value so that both the data around the transaction and the monetary value of the transaction itself can run simultaneously. And that in and of itself, I think we're yet to see play out at scale, and will be certainly very interesting to see how, moving value as well as information becomes very, very important. I might go back to the question I asked you a minute ago, Rebecca.
The monetization one?
Yeah.
Cool. So we started back at Alkimi, where you're using Walrus and Sui as optimizing the supply chain, really. So at that point, we're not really monetizing data. We're making money efficient.
Exactly that, yeah.
But what Walrus actually does, we introduced another technology. It was called Seal, which both George and Ben talked about. That is access control. So as we know, all the data on the blockchain is public by default. Not a bad thing if you don't want everybody in the world to see your data as an individual or as a business. So we created Seal that allows you to encrypt that data, and then you can give access control to anyone you like. So you can let your mother see your holiday photographs or not. Equally, you could charge your mother to look at your holiday photographs. You could charge her just on a Sunday night when you know family dinner is happening, and up the level of expenditure. What's really beautiful about these paradigms is you have total control. Whoever looks at my photographs from my holiday, I still own it. I can let them in, I can shut them out, I can charge them money, I can do whatever I like, because I own that data, okay? So that's very cool. This then makes it possible for whole new revenue streams to exist that have not existed before, or not nearly as kind of seamlessly. So let's say I am a singer for for purposes of this story. I've written a song, I've put it up on Walrus, and somebody has built a decentralized Spotify. I own that song, I control that song, and I can give decentralized Spotify access to that song as and when I want it, and I still control the pricing, the access, the whole thing. Now, Taylor Swift did this, but she spent 10 years and about $1 billion trying to own her own music. Walrus allows you to do it at really pennies on a gigabyte. So if you're going to go down that route, that's a nice little route for you. There's also stuff like a lot of people are using us, AI models are using us, so they are storing their models on Walrus, and they are giving access to those models to other AI chatbots or whatever through a smart contract, and they pay for access to that data. Now, that was not something that was easily monetizable before Walrus and Seal came along. So we're inventing new ways of creating revenue streams. What have I missed, George?
Yeah, I want to approach this question also from the other angle. What is the way to not make money?
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that some data sets are a public good, right? And we really designed Walrus also to be able to efficiently support data that is a public good by ensuring that everybody knows what it is, no one can modify it without others noticing, but also in ways where the cost of actually storing it, accessing it, etc., can be shared depending on very flexible rules, right? So I'm gonna, give a little bit of a preview. We are, for example, in the process of uploading the full SWI history as a blockchain to Walrus right now. It's being uploaded right now. And as we know, for a major blockchain, the chain history is absolutely critical to ensure that, what is happening today on chain is correct. It's actually, the result of what has happened since the beginning of time. The current model of doing that is literally having potentially hundreds of parties storing all that, or at worst, having only a handful of parties storing all that, very often on clouds and very central places that may or may not be there tomorrow. So this is an example of a data set that is absolutely vital to a whole ecosystem, that many parties have very good reason to share the cost of actually storing it, and up to now the only choice that they had was really to either have a copy for themselves, and that has a cost that multiplies, right? Or effectively trust some big cloud provider to store it, which is not really where we want to be as an industry. So this is, again, one of the first use cases where we see a public good effectively being able to emerge. But as we know, public goods, the difficulty about public goods is how you fund them, right? So we are actually going to experiment on chain with different contracts where different parties that then rely on that chain history can effectively tip for that chain history to remain up, on the basis that it's much cheaper to do that on a decentralized store like Walrus rather than each for themselves.
And George, question to you again. In terms of use cases that you were talking about and adoption and different geographies. So I just came back from a Southeast Asian roadshow, and I was in Korea, I was in Taipei, where I saw really strong SWI communities, by the way. So I'd like to have a bit of an understanding of what differences are there in terms of adoption that you have seen.
I think different geographies have a very different attitude towards blockchain in general, and I think decentralization of different parts of the stack specifically. I think that in more developed economies, in terms of the developed financial system, very often people ask the question, why would I need a stable coin? Why would I need payments over crypto? Because very often the payment systems and the banking systems work well, right? In many places that I also travel around the world, that question never emerges because, the money that is available to people, let alone the infrastructures, the banking system just doesn't work very well. So suddenly, crypto is very compelling as a proposition when it comes to the money aspect of crypto. And I think that similarly, when it comes to the data aspects, again, different geographies have a very different attitude towards the existing solutions, let's say, that we have today. Again, if you go to the US, probably people will be like, Okay, well, there is Amazon Web Services, there is Google Cloud. It's a US company. It's kind of within reach, if you want, both of being able to access it, but also, it's regulated locally and you have some remedy if something goes wrong. If you're in Southeast Asia or in Greece, where I'm from, this is a company that literally is operating in the other side of the world, right? In a foreign jurisdiction that may or may not continue giving you access to your data tomorrow if things geopolitically change. And therefore, the angst around, why do I trust that this data is going to be there tomorrow? Is it going to be the same data? Will I be able to have access to it? And even worse, will I be able to build a business model around that data being there, being accessible, being processed, if suddenly I'm cut off from that part of the world because of some geopolitical issue or some commercial decision of one of these companies that fundamentally is not native of where I am from. So I think those sensitivities are much heightened if you're not really in the US or broadly speaking in the West indeed.
In your case, how do you make it sustainable so that it is actually sustainable to build a business on top of it?
Well, we remove that equation to some extent, right? I mean, we build systems that are not really dependent on a particular jurisdiction or a particular set of services in a particular location. So, Walrus being one example, it has over 100 storage nodes. It's operating its economics on a blockchain which is equally decentralized. All the payments are done through that. So, if you are in a region of the world, that has those sensitivities that I described, you can use it pretty much at an equal footing than if you are in the US or the UK.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the point you made around like the distribution of the actual storage itself geographically for an ad exchange business is quite interesting, because who knows where a bid request will originate from at some point. It can be, I could be reading the Times in, I don't know, Spain, and someone based in the UK might want to show me an ad for a UK brand, and often those requests can time out because they're pinging somewhere. It could be, it's typically like East Coast, West Coast, Hamburg, and somewhere in APAC typically. And you have a very small window to reply to that. And so there's a ton of wastage in terms of just bid requests that expire before they've been able to be responded to. So like a distributed network actually reduces the latency in which we can respond to a bid request, because we can just source what we need from the closest point by which the information needs to come from. So for us, it's a very technical point, but it's like equally very important, because there's a ton of money that's just wasted, or a ton of bids that never made it that should have done, which costs people that are selling ads money every single day. So yeah, it's a cool bit of kit. I personally love it for a whole host of reasons, but it's great. It's more efficient, I think, to play the opposite part of that argument. Like, what do you think is the friction that's preventing something that serves markets better than perhaps existing solutions, or in a way that's slightly differentiated from existing solutions?
I can take that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I would say the first thing, like the hardest thing to change ever is consumer behavior, right?
Yeah.
So this is what everyone here is trying to do, like change and try to have Web3 adoption. Oh, we're going to onboard the next billion of users. Everyone's claim is usually this. But so how do you do it in turn? So you were talking about earlier about incentivizing, for example, LLMs in the future, right?
Yeah.
When business models are changing. So in terms of changing user behavior, I think the first part is, yes, what incentive is a person gonna have to start using your tech stack instead of one another?
Yeah.
And there's a lot embedded again in storytelling, in how you're telling your story and why it stands out. So yeah, making it palatable in the first place would be important, but changing that consumer behavior is one of the first like rocks or hurdles that I see for people to to adopt new technologies.
Yeah, I agree. It's tricky, you know. I think there's the technology has a huge part to play. Like, you're already seeing behaviors change. Like, people go to search engines less than they used to. That's like demonstrable changing of behavior. Do you think that the same is true for enterprise applications, Rebecca? They're often dictated to less by, at least in the immediate term, consumer behaviors. Like, how do you see any friction there with adopting the SWE stack, with Walrus in particular? What do you think the path is to helping them find the righteous path?
My experience with, it's probably a good thing, George. My experience with enterprise is it can take quite a long time to turn those ships around, especially anyone who's worked anywhere near banking or even big supermarkets. It's really hard. Technology adoption seems to either happen from the CTO down or from some rogue developer who's been a couple of years in and sees something cool and starts building and gets adoption on the sly. That approach seems to be the one that gets adopted best, I find, because developers have a very strong sense of not repeating things, doing things that are easy to work. So anyone here who is building software, this, you know, very famous books have been written about the adoption. I think it's hand-to-hand combat. You get in there, you find the people that need your technology, and you work with them. And if you're lucky enough to have resources, you spend those resources, time, money, energy, research, to help those people actually be successful.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
I don't think it's anything cleverer than that. You just have to do every one of those stages very, very well.
I completely agree. Yeah, it's just like doing the boring stuff right over and over and over and over and over and over again, and that's generally.
We don't find it boring.
No, it's not boring. If anyone wants to talk to me about ad tech, I will talk to you forever. I wonder, George, have you got any kind of? If we zoom out, I think, like, where do you think that blockers might be from like a macro perspective?
Yeah, I think that at this point, the technology has ceased to be in itself a blocker, which is a great place to be, right? Because if we look at blockchain ecosystems, and I'm talking here not just about the blockchain itself, but everything else around the blockchain. I mean, 15 years ago it was just starting. 10 years ago it was still an awkward thing to build on. By now, major blockchain ecosystem, the SWE stack included, but also competitors, are very mature technologies. You can build some pretty advanced stuff. So the technology has ceased to be the bottleneck. So the bottleneck starts being the classic adoption question, which is more of a business question. And really it speaks to what you were talking about a second ago about how is a technology that is fundamentally different being adopted? And this is a question that is common to Web3 as well as to AI. And there, we very often talk about enterprise adoption. But if I look back to how new technologies were adopted from computerization itself to the internet, etc., I think there is a part of the cycle where every company has some kind of VP for the new technology. And there is a part of the cycle where that generates hype about how suddenly now that has broken to the mainstream. But I think that part of the cycle is in terms of perceptions. And I think we've been there and maybe past that. And then all of that just goes away, okay? And then what we usually see is companies that are leveraging those technologies natively that then manage to extract value out of that technology. Because the truth is that existing companies that have built business models around old ways of doing things find it very difficult to adapt, to take that risk, and to also restructure their organization internally and their business models to maximally get value out of new technologies. So more often than not, what we see is new companies that don't have that kind of baggage, either as a business model or as legacy technology or legacy organization, managing to grab the opportunity, leveraging the productivity gains or the market, and then becoming big on the back of a new technological wave. So as much as I love talking to enterprise, the enterprise that I'm interested in is the enterprise that doesn't exist yet. It is really the companies that will take a Sui stack or a blockchain stack and be like, you know what, I can actually build social media in a way that is fundamentally different than anything that we have done before, because now my users can really own data, you know, do actions that have value on chain or whatever, like nothing that like what we had before. And that's just one example. I think there are many verticals that are ready for that disruption.
And George, in addition to that, I think the social context is really important. So as in sense of belonging from a psychological perspective, sense of belonging is really important for communities. And at the end of the day, your communities are your advocates, are gonna be your brand advocates, are gonna basically spread the word about how good your technology is, how you should adopt it, etc. And that creates that sort of domino effect, right? So we've seen communities that like blockchains that very, very successfully have gathered communities around in a very creative way as well. I know Sui has Swisterhood, there's some others as well that are arranging their different communities in many different countries. And it is great to see, but also that proves that creates a lot of traction. At the end of the day, you need people to adopt your technology, start using it, prove it, test it, and then see what works, what doesn't work, right?
And if I can ask a question for you, Laura, so how do you bridge, if you want, that future vision that is not quite there with, you know, the need to effectively enthuse a community and you know, have people believe something that is only 1% here at any point?
Right, it was a very good question. So actually, it used to be way back when, like many years ago, build and they will come, right? Like that sort of thesis. But now we're at the point where there's a lot of noise in the crypto marketing and PR world. Everyone has the best story, everyone has the best technology. So how do you really stand out? So we see lots of narratives that fail. But for us, like in order to be able to PR something or market something, we need to build that story from the ground up, and it's an honest story. So people relate to stories. They don't relate to companies or tech stacks. They relate to who is behind the project, who's running the project, and who's the community behind it, and why is it so good. And at the end of the day, you can say that your chain is only as good, but when people adopt it, that is not really the case. Or like, well, trust crises are very are commonplace in our industry, actually, and that's why I still have a job. So that's what we're trying to do, is like help when these crises arise, but also try to avoid them altogether by building an honest story, which is based on facts, really. You need data, you need traction, and every time that we get a news announcement that has no data, basically no data point on what has happened with that tech stack, we don't push it out, basically.
Sorry to interrupt, guys. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap this one up as we have our next speaker coming on soon. But
Sure.
I'll just leave you guys with some closing thoughts.
No encore today, sorry everyone. Rebecca, Laura, George, thank you so much for joining me. I think this has been brilliant. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.